The party that changed everything. Sarah Chen adjusted her navy blue dress for the third time as she stood outside the glass doors of the rooftop bar. The city lights twinkled below like scattered diamonds, but her stomach churned with nervous energy. Tonight was supposed to be special. Jessica's promotion party, a celebration among friends she'd known since college. Little did she know that this evening would shatter her world and rebuild it in ways she never imagined. The warm summer air carried laughter and music from inside as she pushed through the doors. The trendy venue buzzed with conversations, clinking glasses, and the soft jazz that Jessica always preferred for her gatherings. Sarah scanned the crowd, spotting familiar faces from their tight-knit group of friends who had weathered college together and now navigated their late 20s in the bustling city. Sarah. There you are! Jessica's voice cut through the noise, but something in her tone felt different. Forced. Sarah turned to see her best friend approaching with a group that included David, her ex-boyfriend from 2 years ago, and several others from their circle. "Congratulations on the promotion, Jess. I'm so proud of you," Sarah said genuinely, offering a warm hug. But Jessica's embrace felt mechanical, lasting only a second before she pulled away. "Thanks. Listen, we were just talking about relationships and dating disasters," Jessica said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You know how it is." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The way everyone was looking at her, with barely concealed amusement and something that looked dangerously close to pity, made her stomach drop. These were supposed to be her closest friends, people she'd shared her deepest secrets with, people she'd trusted with her heart. The cruel revelation. "Actually, Sarah, we were just discussing your dating life," said Marcus Torres. Not the Marcus from our story, but another friend from college who had always been somewhat competitive with her. Or should I say lack thereof? The group erupted in snickers, and Sarah felt heat creep up her neck. "What do you mean?" "Come on, Sarah. You're almost 30 and you haven't had a serious relationship since David here?" Jessica chimed in, gesturing toward Sarah's ex-boyfriend who was smirking behind his beer bottle. "And that was 2 years ago." "That's not true, and you know it," Sarah protested, though her voice came out smaller than she intended. "I've been dating. I just haven't found the right person yet." "Dating?" David laughed outright now. "You mean those awkward coffee meetings that never lead to second dates?" "Sarah, we've all seen your dating app conversations. They're painful to watch." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. How did they know about her dating app conversations? The only person she'd ever shared screenshots with was Jessica. During their weekly coffee dates when they'd laugh about bad pickup lines and awkward first meetings. "Jessica, you showed them my private messages?" Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "We're just worried about you, Sarah," Jessica said, though her eyes sparkled with malicious glee. "You've become so desperate lately. Remember that guy last month who you thought was interested, but he was just being polite? You texted us for hours about how you thought he was the one after one conversation." The circle of friends laughed again, and Sarah felt like she was drowning in their cruel amusement. These people had seen her at her most vulnerable, had supported her through her breakup with David, had celebrated her career successes. Now they were weaponizing her trust against her. "Or what about that disaster of a date 2 weeks ago?" added another friend, Lisa. "The one where you wore that dress you spent half your paycheck on, only to have him cancel last minute?" "You cried for 3 days!" "Stop," Sarah whispered, but her voice was lost in their laughter. "The best part," Jessica continued, clearly enjoying herself now, "is how she always thinks these guys are interested in her when they're just being polite. It's actually kind of sad how desperate she's become." David, emboldened by the group's energy, stepped closer. "You know what your problem is, Sarah? You're too eager, too available. Guys can smell desperation from a mile away. That's why we broke up. You were suffocating me with your neediness." The breaking point. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Every insecurity she'd ever had about herself was being laid bare for entertainment. The friend group she'd considered her chosen family was dissecting her romantic failures like she wasn't even there. Worse, they were enjoying it. "I thought you cared about me," Sarah managed to say, looking directly at Jessica. "I thought you were my friend." "We do care, Sarah." That's why we're being honest, Jessica replied with fake sympathy. Someone has to tell you the truth. You're becoming that desperate single friend that everyone feels sorry for. It's embarrassing to watch. The final straw came when Lisa pulled out her phone. Should we show her the group chat? The one where we've been discussing her dating disasters. Some of the things we've said are hilarious. Sarah's world tilted. There was a group chat about her. They'd been talking about her behind her back, laughing at her vulnerabilities, turning her trust into entertainment. The people she'd thought were her support system had been her critics all along. Without another word, Sarah turned and pushed through the crowd toward the exit. Behind her, she could hear Jessica calling her name, but it sounded hollow and insincere. The laughter followed her as she stumbled through the glass doors and into the elevator. The escape. The elevator ride down felt endless. Sarah's reflection in the polished metal doors showed a woman on the verge of collapse. Mascara smudged, face pale, hands shaking. By the time she reached the ground floor, tears were streaming down her face. She stumbled out onto the sidewalk, the cool night air hitting her overheated skin. The city buzzed around her with its usual energy. Cars rushing past, people walking in groups, the distant sound of music from various establishments. But Sarah felt completely alone in the crowd. Her phone buzzed with messages, probably from the group trying to save face or continue their cruel game. But she turned it off without looking. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to be anywhere but here. Wandering aimlessly through the city streets, Sarah found herself in a quieter district she rarely visited. The buildings here were older, more intimate, with small cafes and bookshops that stayed open late. Her feet, aching in the heels she'd chosen to impress friends who had just destroyed her, carried her toward a small cafe with warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. The Sanctuary Moonbeam Cafe, read the hand-painted sign above the door. Through the window, Sarah could see only a few patrons scattered among mismatched chairs and tables loaded with books. It looked like the kind of place where broken hearts came to heal. The bell above the door chimed softly as she entered. The scent of coffee and old books enveloped her like a warm hug. Soft acoustic music played from hidden speakers, and the lighting was dim enough that she felt her raw vulnerability might not be so exposed. "Welcome to Moonbeam," said a gentle voice from behind the counter. The barista was a young woman with kind eyes and purple streaks in her hair. "What can I get you? Just coffee? Something strong?" Sarah managed, her voice still shaky from crying. "Rough night?" the barista asked with genuine concern, not judgment. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. The barista prepared her order with quiet efficiency, and Sarah found a corner table away from the few other customers. She needed to think, to process what had just happened, to figure out how to rebuild her social world from scratch. The mysterious stranger. As she sat with her coffee, staring out the window at the quiet street, Sarah became aware of someone approaching her table. She looked up to see a man in his early 30s, tall and well-dressed despite the casual cafe setting. His dark hair was slightly messed by the wind, and his green eyes held an expression of genuine concern. "Excuse me," he said in a warm, deep voice. "I don't mean to intrude, but you look like you could use a friend right now. I'm Marcus." Normally, Sarah would have been suspicious of a stranger approaching her when she was clearly vulnerable, but something about his presence felt safe, protective even. Maybe it was the way he kept a respectful distance, or how his eyes held kindness rather than predatory interest. "I'm Sarah," she replied quietly. "And you're right. It has been a terrible night. Would you mind if I sat down? Sometimes talking to someone you don't know can be easier than talking to people you do know." Sarah studied his face for a moment. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. His expensive suit suggested success, but he wore it casually, like someone comfortable with himself. Most importantly, he didn't look at her with pity or amusement, just genuine human concern. "Please," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Marcus signaled the barista for his own coffee before settling into the chair. I hope this doesn't sound presumptuous, but you look like someone who just discovered that people you trusted weren't worthy of that trust. Sarah's eyes widened. How did you? I recognize the expression. I've worn it myself. He leaned back slightly, giving her space. Sometimes the people closest to us can hurt us the most because they know exactly where to aim. For the first time all evening, Sarah felt truly seen. Not judged, not pitied, but understood. My friends, my best friend. They made me feel like I was pathetic for wanting love, like my loneliness was entertainment for them. That says everything about them and nothing about you, Marcus said firmly. Wanting connection, wanting love, that's not pathetic. That's human. The connection begins. As they talked, Sarah found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. Marcus listened without judgment, offering insights that came from experience rather than empty platitudes. He spoke about his own experiences with betrayal, though he kept the details vague, focusing instead on how he'd learned to trust again. The hardest part, he said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully, is learning that other people's cruelty is about their own insecurities, not about your worth. But what if they're right? Sarah asked, voicing her deepest fear. What if I am too eager, too desperate? What if that's why I keep getting hurt? Marcus leaned forward slightly, his green eyes intense. Sarah, in the short time I've been talking to you, I've seen intelligence, kindness, and remarkable strength. You've just been hurt by people who should have protected you. And you're still sitting here, still trying to understand and grow from it. That's not desperation. That's courage. Something in his voice made her really look at him for the first time. There was an authority there, a confidence that suggested he was used to being listened to. But more than that, there was something in his eyes when he looked at her, a recognition that went deeper than their brief conversation. Have we met before? She asked suddenly. A flicker of something passed across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or calculation. I don't think so. I would have remembered. But even as he said it, Sarah had the strangest feeling that this wasn't entirely true. There was something about the way he'd found her tonight, the way he seemed to understand her pain so precisely, that felt like more than coincidence. The night's end. They talked until the cafe began to close, covering everything from books to travel to dreams they'd set aside for practical careers. Marcus was well-read and thoughtful, with experiences that suggested he'd traveled extensively and succeeded in whatever field he worked in, though he remained vague about his professional life. I should let you get home, he said, as the barista began stacking chairs around them. But Sarah, I want you to remember something. Tonight doesn't define you. Those people don't get to decide your worth. Thank you, she said, meaning it more than she'd meant anything in a long time. I don't know why you stopped to help a stranger, but I'm grateful you did. Sometimes strangers see us more clearly than people who think they know us, he replied, standing and helping her with her jacket. And sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be. As they walked out of the cafe together, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not just hope for healing from tonight's wounds, but hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. Can I see you again? Marcus asked as they stood on the sidewalk. I'd like that, Sarah replied, surprised by how much she meant it. They exchanged numbers, and as Marcus walked her to her car, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this night, which had started as her lowest point, might somehow be the beginning of something extraordinary. She didn't know yet how extraordinary or how many secrets this mysterious man carried. But for the first time in months, she felt like herself again, worthy of kindness, worthy of connection, worthy of love. As she drove home, Sarah caught herself smiling in the rearview mirror. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions about who she could trust and how to rebuild her social circle. But tonight had taught her something invaluable, that sometimes our greatest pain leads us exactly where we need to be. Hidden truths revealed. 3 days later, Sarah stared at her laptop screen, the cursor blinking mockingly at the end of an unfinished marketing report. The open-plan office of Whitmore Digital buzzed with its usual midweek energy, but she felt disconnected from it all. 3 days had passed since the incident at Jessica's party, and while her wounds were still raw, something had shifted inside her. Maybe it was Marcus's words echoing in her mind, or maybe it was finally seeing her so-called friends for who they truly were. Her phone buzzed with another text from Jessica, the 7th one this week. Sarah had been ignoring them all. The messages ranged from fake apologies to attempts at justification to outright demands that she stop being dramatic. Each one only confirmed that cutting them out of her life had been the right decision. "Sarah, you have a visitor at reception," came the voice of Jamie, the office coordinator, over the intercom. Puzzled, Sarah made her way to the front desk. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her family lived across the country. Her breath caught when she saw who was waiting for her. Marcus stood near the glass entrance, looking even more striking than she remembered. Today he wore a charcoal gray suit that was clearly expensive, and he carried himself with an authority that seemed more pronounced in the bright office lighting. Several of her female co-workers were stealing glances at him from behind their desks. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" she asked, approaching him with a mixture of surprise and pleasure. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," he said, that familiar warmth in his green eyes. "I was in the neighborhood for a meeting, and I thought I'd see if you wanted to grab lunch." "You know where I work?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Something flickered across his face, that same expression she'd noticed at the cafe when she'd asked if they'd met before. "I may have done some research after we met. I wanted to make sure you were real and not just a beautiful dream I'd imagined." The revelation begins. Over lunch at a quiet bistro near her office, Sarah found herself studying Marcus more carefully. There was something different about him today, more guarded, as if he was holding something back. The easy conversation from the cafe felt slightly strained, despite their mutual attraction. "Marcus, what do you do for work?" she asked directly. "You've been evasive about it, and I'm curious." He set down his coffee cup and looked at her for a long moment. "I run a tech company, Sterling Innovations. We develop software solutions for marketing agencies." Sarah nearly choked on her water. Sterling Innovations was one of the biggest names in their industry. Their software was used by hundreds of companies, including Whitmore Digital. She'd seen the name Marcus Sterling on countless emails and contracts, but had never connected it to the man sitting across from her. "You're Marcus Sterling," she said slowly. "As in the CEO of Sterling Innovations." "Yes, the Marcus Sterling whose company just acquired 3 competitors last month and made headlines for revolutionizing digital marketing analytics." "That would be me?" Sarah leaned back in her chair, processing this information. The man who had comforted her in her lowest moment, who had seemed so genuinely concerned for a stranger's well-being, was one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the city. Someone completely out of her league in every conceivable way. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked quietly. "Because I liked the way you looked at me when you didn't know who I was," he admitted. "Most people, when they find out what I do, what I'm worth, they start treating me differently. They see opportunity instead of a person, the deeper truth, but that's not the whole truth, is it?" Sarah pressed, her instincts as a marketer kicking in. She was good at reading people, at sensing when information was being withheld. "There's something else." Marcus was quiet for so long that Sarah wondered if he would answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "I've known who you are for longer than 3 days, Sarah." Her heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "Your company, Whitmore Digital, they've been trying to secure a contract with Sterling Innovations for 8 months. You've been the lead on that proposal," Sarah's mind raced. She had been working on the Sterling Innovations proposal. It was one of the biggest potential contracts of her career. She'd spent countless hours crafting presentations, analyzing their needs, preparing for a meeting that kept getting postponed. "Every presentation you submitted crossed my desk," Marcus continued. Every proposal, every marketing strategy you developed for our company. I've been reading your work for months, Sarah. Your insights were brilliant, creative. I kept asking my team who was behind these ideas, so you knew me. Before the cafe, before that night, I knew your work. I knew your mind, but I didn't know you. He leaned forward, his green eyes intense. When I saw your photo attached to one of the proposals, I was intrigued. But it was just professional interest then. The stalker or the guardian Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. How did you end up at that cafe the same night I was there? That's quite a coincidence. Marcus's jaw tightened. It wasn't a coincidence. The words hung in the air between them like a confession. Sarah's hands went cold. I need you to let me explain before you make any judgments, he said quickly, seeing her expression. A few weeks ago, I was at a business dinner at the rooftop bar where your friend's party was held. I saw you there. Recognized you from your photo. You looked radiant, happy. I almost approached you then. But you were clearly with friends. Celebrating something? Jessica's promotion party, Sarah whispered. I left without saying anything, but I couldn't stop thinking about you, about how different you seemed in person from the professional image I had in my head. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with the admission. I started paying attention to your social media. Nothing invasive, just the public posts. I saw that you frequented that area of the city, posted photos from various cafes and bookshops. Sarah's marketing mind was putting the pieces together, and she didn't like the picture they formed. So you were. What, following me? No, God, no. I started going to places in that neighborhood, hoping I might run into you naturally. Hoping for a chance to meet you properly? His voice was pained. I know how this sounds, Sarah. I know it seems calculated and creepy. The night everything changed. The night of the party, she said slowly. You were there again. I was having dinner at the restaurant downstairs. I saw you leave the rooftop bar in distress. You were crying, obviously upset. I followed you, not to hurt you or take advantage, but because you looked like you were in pain and I was worried about your safety. Sarah remembered that night. The blur of tears and anger as she'd stumbled through the streets. She'd been so lost in her own misery that she hadn't noticed anyone following her. I stayed back, just making sure you got somewhere safe. When you went into Moonbeam Cafe, I waited outside for a while, debating whether to leave you alone or... He paused. You looked so broken, Sarah, and I knew that whatever had happened upstairs had devastated you. So you decided to play the knight in shining armor? I decided to be a human being who saw another human being in pain, he said firmly. Everything I said that night, everything I felt, that was real. Yes, I already knew who you were professionally, but emotionally, that was all new. Processing the truth, Sarah pushed her half-eaten salad around her plate, trying to process everything he'd told her. On one hand, it was unsettling to learn that their meeting hadn't been the random act of kindness she'd believed. On the other hand, she couldn't deny that his concern that night had felt genuine, his comfort real. The things you said about betrayal, about recognizing the expression on my face. Was that all an act? No, his answer was immediate and emphatic. I've been betrayed by people I trusted. I have been where you were that night, feeling like everyone you cared about had turned against you. That part was completely honest. What happened to you? Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, My ex-fiancée. She was with me for 3 years. I thought we were building a life together. Turned out she was passing information about my company to a competitor and sleeping with my business partner. When I found out, I discovered that half my social circle had known about it and said nothing. Sarah felt a pang of empathy. Despite her confusion about his methods, she recognized the pain in his voice. It was the same pain she'd felt that night at the cafe. So when you saw me, she began, I saw someone who had just experienced what I'd experienced. And I wanted to help, even if I couldn't reveal everything about how I knew to help. The business connection. The Sterling Innovations contract, Sarah said suddenly. Is that why you're telling me this now? Are you offering it to me as some kind of consolation prize? Marcus looked genuinely shocked. Sarah, no. The contract has nothing to do with this. Your company was already the front runner based purely on merit. Your work speaks for itself. But now that we're whatever we are, how does that affect things? It doesn't. It can't. The contract will be decided on business merits alone. He paused. Though I'll probably have to recuse myself from the final decision to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Sarah appreciated that he'd thought of that, but it raised other questions. Your employees, your business partners, what happens when they find out you're involved with someone from a company you're considering for a major contract? I don't know, he admitted. I haven't thought that far ahead. All I know is that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night at the cafe. Not because of your professional work, not because of any business opportunity, but because of who you are as a person. The choice. Sarah looked across the table at this man who had already turned her world upside down twice. First as her mysterious savior, now as her secret admirer with the power to change her career. It should have felt manipulative, calculated, and part of it did. But there was something else there, too. The way he looked at her, the way he'd risked revealing his deception rather than continuing to hide it, the way he'd immediately thought about the ethical implications of their connection. It all suggested someone struggling with genuine feelings rather than someone playing games. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Of course. I understand. And I need you to be completely honest with me going forward. No more secrets, no more carefully omitted truths. If we're going to see where this goes, it has to be built on transparency. Agreed, he said immediately. Complete honesty. Starting now, is there anything else you haven't told me? Marcus hesitated for just a moment, and Sarah's heart sank. There was more. There's one other thing, he said quietly. Your ex-boyfriend, David, the one who was at the party that night. What about him? He works for one of my competitors, Morrison Tech. And the reason your friend group felt so comfortable mocking your dating life is because David has been telling people at industry events about your relationship, making you sound exactly like they made you sound that night. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. You're saying my private relationship details are being discussed at professional networking events? I'm afraid so. And I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't want to hurt you more than you'd already been hurt. The protective instinct. How do you know this? Sarah asked, though she was starting to suspect the answer. Because Morrison Tech has been trying to poach some of my employees, and David was part of their recruitment pitch. He mentioned having inside information about Whitmore Digital's strategies, and when pressed, he revealed that he had a personal connection to someone on their team. He's been using your relationship history to make himself look more valuable to potential employers. The betrayal hit Sarah like a physical blow. It was one thing for David to hurt her personally, but to use their private moments to advance his career was a violation she hadn't even imagined possible. I wanted to destroy him, Marcus continued, his voice growing harder. When I realized he was talking about you, when I put together that he was the ex-boyfriend who had hurt you, I wanted to ruin his career. But I knew that wouldn't help you, and it would expose our connection before you were ready. Looking at Marcus now, Sarah could see the controlled anger in his posture, the protective instinct that he was barely keeping in check. It should have been concerning, this intensity, but instead it felt cared for, protected. What are you going to do about it? She asked. Nothing unless you want me to. Your career, your choices, but Sarah, you should know that Morrison Tech's offer to your company last month, the one that Whitmore Digital turned down, that was partially based on information David provided about your strategies. He's been betraying you professionally as well as personally. The transformation. Sarah sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by the cascade of revelations. In the space of one lunch, her understanding of the past few months had been completely rewritten. The man across from her was simultaneously her knight in shining armor and her secret observer, her potential romantic interest and her business connection, her protector and her possible manipulator. But looking at him now, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes, the way he was letting her process everything at her own pace, she realized something important. Whatever his methods, whatever his mistakes and how he'd approached their relationship, Marcus Sterling had seen her worth when her closest friends had been blind to it. He had valued her mind before he'd known her heart, and he'd risked his own reputation to comfort her when she was broken. Marcus, she said finally, I need you to understand something. I'm not the desperate, pathetic woman that David and Jessica made me out to be. I'm not looking for someone to save me or fix my life. I know that, he said immediately. That's not what I see when I look at you. What do you see? He was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. I see someone who puts her whole heart into everything she does. Your work, your friendships, your relationships. I see someone who trusted people who didn't deserve it, but who hasn't let that make her bitter or closed off. I see strength and intelligence and a capacity for love that terrifies me because I want it so badly. The leap. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun streaming through the restaurant windows. This morning, she'd been nursing coffee alone in her apartment, still raw from her friend's betrayal, still uncertain about her worth. Now she was looking at a man who had seen her value long before he'd known her personally, who had protected her reputation even when she didn't know it needed protecting, who was willing to risk his own professional standing for her emotional well-being. I have conditions, she said. Name them. First, complete transparency from here forward. I need to know that you're choosing me, not managing me. Done. Second, we keep our personal relationship completely separate from any business dealings between our companies. Whatever happens with the Sterling Innovations contract happens on merit alone. Absolutely. Third, she paused, gathering her courage. I need you to kiss me right now so I can stop overthinking this and start feeling it instead. Marcus's eyes went wide with surprise, then darkened with something that made Sarah's pulse race. Right here? In the middle of lunch? Right here. Right now. Before I lose my nerve and before I start cataloging all the reasons this is complicated. He stood up from his chair and came around to her side of the table. When he cupped her face in his hands, Sarah felt like every nerve ending in her body came alive. His kiss was gentle at first, questioning, but when she responded by pulling him closer, it deepened into something that made her forget they were in a public place. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah looked into his green eyes and saw her own amazement reflected back at her. So, he said, his voice slightly rough, where do we go from here? Somewhere private, she said, surprising herself with her boldness. Because I think we have a lot more truth-telling to do, and I'd prefer to do it without an audience. As Marcus signaled for the check, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The thrilling uncertainty of a new beginning, combined with the deep satisfaction of being truly seen by someone who mattered. Whatever came next, whatever complications arose from mixing business with pleasure, she was ready to face it all.